You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
There's a big value in just getting on set and saying, hey, I will come work for free, and you just teach me everything you know. Deal?
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. This is the Dave Bullis Podcast, and I'm your host, Dave Bullis, but I think most of you know that by now. Before I get to this week's episode, by the time you're hearing this podcast will be Podbean's Podcast of the Week. So if you're not a fan of their Twitter or their Facebook profiles, please check out those profiles, click like, and tell them how much you like the podcast, because they'll see all of that, and that actually ends up helping the podcast even more. And, as always, I'm very appreciative to everybody who subscribes to the podcast and who also takes the time to rate it on iTunes. And I also want to thank everybody who shared the 100th episode and the corresponding blog article, what I learned from doing 100 episodes of my podcast. It actually got some pretty good traction on LinkedIn, so I'm going to end up posting them there more. So on this week's episode, we have working videographer and filmmaker Chris Hatchett. So here it is, episode 101 of the Dave Bullis Podcast.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Hey everyone, thanks again for joining me for another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Joining me today is Chris Hatchett. Chris is a filmmaker and commercial videographer, and this is also his first ever podcast. Chris, how's everything out in Texas?
Dave, thanks, man. It's really good out here. Unseasonably warm. It's a perfect day to get out and go out and shoot stuff.
I hear you. It's actually one of the first nice days out here in Philadelphia, too. It actually feels like spring right now.
Nice. I want to be out shooting right now, but trying to figure out what to go shoot exactly.
I hear you. I honestly, I hear you. And I'm sure, there's a lot of folks out there, who feel that exact same way. You have gear, or even you just have a phone, and you're like, damn, now I need something to actually shoot.
Right. You want to call up all your actor friends and be like, hey, man, what are you doing right now? And of course, all of them are busy waiting tables or doing whatever they do for their day jobs. They're like, oh, let me know earlier and I can come out. It's just funny how that works.
There's a saying around here in Philly that the summertime is the worst time to shoot a movie, because when you call all your actor friends, they're all at the shore or the beach. And because here in Philadelphia, we actually separate that, by the way. If you're going to the shore, that means you're going to Jersey. And if you say you're going to the beach, you're going to Delaware.
Oh, see, we just have the one here. It's like you're going to the beach, you're either down in the Gulf and at one point or the other, and it's all brown water. It's great.
So, Chris, a question I always ask everybody, and I wanted to ask you is, how did you get started in the film industry? So
it's actually funny. I was not that guy that at 5 said, oh, man, I really want to make film. I really want to make movies and stuff. I was a aviation buff, and I loved flying and all that. And it just so happened that as I was in the middle of a career transition, ironically, I was going to this church with a girl I met, and they were very big and heavy in the media side of things, and saw the cameras and lights and all the moving parts and said, man, that looks kind of like a cool job, And she said, oh, well, those are just volunteers. I said, volunteers, that's expensive gear, How do you volunteer? And it's funny because I started talking to some of the camera operators and some of the guys up at the control room, and, they work in broadcast full time. And, they were like, oh yeah, I volunteer here once a quarter or once, every once in a while. And I was like, man, I'm here every Sunday. I'm here every weekend, just teach me everything, and I just went into sponge mode, and it became one of those things where it wasn't a job anymore. It was, hey, I'm getting to go do this. I'm having fun. Like, pay me or not, like I would still be here because this is just fun. And that's kind of where everything blossomed from, because it just so happened that it was an organization that had a big spread across the Bible Belt down here in Texas and Oklahoma and such. And they just had all kinds of production work that they were feeding. They were doing movies, they were doing TV shows. And I just kind of climbed the ladder and kind of sunk down into my little niche of producing and directing. And it was downhill from there, or uphill, should I rather say. So I'm still climbing. I have not anywhere near arrived, but I'm still on that path,
I completely understand where you're coming from. Just speaking to other guests on the show, for instance, we all have that where it's like we just want to grab onto somebody and be like, just teach me everything you possibly can, until they're like, Jesus, get away, kid.
Yeah, right. Get away, kid! You bothered me. Get off the shirt.
It's like, not this kid's back again. Oh my God, what are we gonna
They're
do?
like, oh wait, he wants to work for free. No, it's cool. We'll keep him. We'll keep him. We'll keep him. He works hard. He doesn't want a paycheck. He just wants to learn. I'm like, yeah, that's me. Come on, sign me up, coach. Put me in.
See, because the reason I always ask about backgrounds is one of the things is about film school.
Mhm.
And I'm always, asking that question because I'm interested to see who went to film school and who didn't.
Sure.
And I'm sorry?
No, sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I didn't go to film school. And, there's always a push because some people say, yeah, film school really helped. While others who went, they said, yeah, it kind of helped, but I learned more, blah, blah. I mean, and I think the best way to do this, honestly, is the way, you just said, is just if you just go out there and see what's out there and just do it, if you know what I mean.
Oh man, for sure. I had a little bit of both where I was attending film school, and it was one of those things where the minute I realized that this was not for me was there's a required course. It was a photography course. And it was right around the days when HDR, high dynamic range photography, was kind of just fresh and new, and everybody was like, "Oh man, look at the detail in that shot." And I had done a landscape photography project, and the professor was like, "Man, how'd you get such detail in the shot?" He had no idea what HDR was. And granted, my career path wasn't photography, but I was just like, "Man." He said, "Oh, could you give a lecture next week?" And I said, "Yeah, if you'll give me an A for the course, for the rest of the time, and mark me present to where I don't have to show up and take your class anymore. Yeah, I'll teach a lecture." And it was just funny. It was at that point I was like, maybe there's something else out there. And then as I was having those kind of mixed feelings of, oh, am I in the right place? Is this the right? Am I spending my money that I didn't have the right way? It was one of those deals where I started getting job offers through some mutual friends that I had that were in the industry working, that I'd, again, met through that first church I was working at. And so I started taking some of those jobs, and I wasn't able to make class because I was on set. And I kind of stepped back one day and I was evaluating and saying, I'm learning more getting out here and doing this versus learning about the theory on why it's done. Theory is important. I would never underestimate the value of theory and learning the why, to how things are done. But I still think there's an intrinsic value of getting out there and actually doing things on set. If you are really interested in electrics, being an electrician and lighting and stuff, being on set and moving lights around and placing lights and running Jenny and running 20-aught cord, it's all, you learn so much more by actually getting out there and doing it versus learning, hey, this is what you do. This is what these things are called. Because every crew calls things differently. So you can learn proper film terminology from, Ivy League of film schools, but it doesn't mean anything when you get on set with a bunch of union guys that are talking about smacking blondes and striking babies and all these different terminology that people use on set. And it's regional. So it may be one term in West Coast and a different term up there in Philly. And so none of that really ends up making sense. So there's a big value in just getting on set and saying, hey, I will come work for free, and you just teach me everything deal. I've had guys that I've done that with. They're like, hey man, I really want to get into the film industry. I don't have an in. Can I just come work on your set and move stuff around? Heck yeah, you can. You're going to help me on my bottom line and you're going to work hard. Awesome. Let's do it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. By the way, I have to ask, did that professor go for that deal?
He did. And I never had to take that photography class again. It's just, it was just a real trippy thing. Granted, he was an old school cat. And so, I'm sure he was probably one of those photographers that, when everything moved digital from, traditional film, that he was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go teach, college now, so he might have been that type of guy, but, he was still a cool guy, but it was just funny, that I went from student to teacher in a matter of a week.
I actually have done work at a college. When I was in college, actually, they came to me and they said, hey, listen, you're good at editing. I went to school for business. So they said, hey, you're pretty good at editing. and nobody was teaching editing courses. And like the advanced TV kids, the advanced video kids, the advanced whatever, they had no editing training in anything, and I mean absolutely nothing. And so they were coming down to the editing lab, and I was editing independent films I was shooting, just funny shorts or whatever else. And the teacher who I had known before, he came in one day and he was like, "Could you teach how to do this to my students?" And I said, "Well, what's in it for me?"
Right.
And he was like, "Well, nothing." And I go, I was like, no. I mean, it's like, are you getting paid or the other two? So I ended up with a never ending stream of people coming down to ask me for help with stuff. And I said, listen, you guys better be bitching and moaning to the school about this. Cause I said, I'm giving you guys free editing courses.
Right.
And my God, I couldn't even edit my own stuff. So finally I said to them, you have to get an editing teacher here. And finally they hired a part-time guy, and he only knew Sony Vegas Studios.
Oh man.
He didn't know Premiere. He didn't know Final Cut. He didn't know anything. And needless to say that it just like almost made a bad situation worse.
Yeah.
So like, that's when I was like, man, I was like, I hope these kids aren't really paying for their diploma, because if this is, because this is already bad, what are they even learning in the class?
Right. And, it's interesting that even, some of these for-profit film schools and, some of these state-run film schools even, you pay all this money, you get into all this debt. And if you walked away with something that was valuable, and you walked away with something that was actually placing you directly into a job where you were making what you were paying, where you could pay off your college debt quick, yeah, sure, that's a value add. But to be able to even work your way to a point where you're getting paid a little something on set, even if it's $100 a day, and you're working 5 days a week on set at $100 a day, you're still making $500 a week, which is a whole heck of a lot more than a lot of college students are making. And you're not accruing all this debt that you're going to pay off when you're 60,
That's me, Chris. I'm on the get out of debt by 60 program.
Yeah, you and me both, man. You and me both.
So, since you're actually going out there, you're actually doing it, the way we actually met was by an article called, How Much Does a Video Actually Cost?
Sure.
Obviously, you have all the experience. So can you take us through, what was the impetus to start that blog post, and, give us a little synopsis about the blog?
Yeah, sure. So, anybody that works in the commercial film market knows that there's two questions that they get on probably about a 2 to 3 times a day basis. And it's usually in a phone call, an email, or a casual conversation when you say, oh yeah, I make videos, and, this is what I do for a living. Oh man, well, that's cool. So like, if I needed to get a video, what would that cost? And my answer to that has always kind of jokingly been like, I don't know, are we just having a talking head, or do we have juggling midgets in this? Because, I know that's not PC. Sorry, little people out there, but
this podcast is uncensored.
Right.
Feel free to let that M word fly.
Right. So, I always say, are we having juggling midgets? Because if so, I got to go to the circus, hire the midgets, teach them how to juggle, get the plates, all of that. I don't know what it's going to cost, because I don't know what goes into your video. And, I'm having to have this conversation repeatedly. And so I was like, I'm just going to sit down, and I'm going to take the time, and I'm just going to write down everything about it. And I'm not a concise blogger. If you'll notice, a lot of my blogs are sometimes fall into the too long didn't read category. And that's been my biggest challenge, is trying to, shorten things down to bite-sized content. But with this one, it's a little bit long, just because there's so much content in here that really can go into, a major commercial campaign video. And so I just wanted to outline it, because I wanted to be able to send that link off when I get those emails. Hey, how much does the video cost? Cool, read this. I don't care if you skim it, read this, here's the kitchen, here's the cabinets and everything that goes into it. You're going to make a meal tonight. We're going to make a video together that's like this meal. Here's what everything costs. Do you want to put this into your recipe? Do you want to put this in? And I kind of try to prioritize it by the most important things from the top, and then it kind of gets down to there are things that are important, but there are things that you can do without for a small budget video. And so as I kind of walked through here, I looked at some of my past projects and just kind of went through the list. and kind of broke it down by what I was paying people and tried to equivalent that to what somebody would make in an hour. Typically in the film world, nobody's really paid hourly. They're paid either half day rate or full day rate, unless you get into union stuff. But so I tried to break this down in hourly to help the non-film world people understand, what these people are making. So as I went through here, the most important part of it is the expertise of the people that you have actually spearheading the project. And that can be measured in multiple different ways, through how long your producer's been in the industry, how many projects that they've had that have been successful projects. Because there's a lot of people out there that, they have a whole laundry list of projects they've done, but none of them have actually been really that great. And, there's projects that I could list on my resume that really weren't that great. And I don't list them on there because I'd rather have, a few quality projects that may or might not have been award winning, have those listed on there versus, just a bunch of mediocre stuff. So having somebody to lead a project that has a good resume, that has good experience, that's a key part to making this whole thing come together, because they're going to be the ones that are, number one, going to help you do it the most efficient way. That's going to be most time sensitive and cost effective. But they're going to be the one that is really going to be the glue to hold everything together, And so as I go through here and I break it down, from the corporate video production expertise, you've got things like the cost of, you can pay $25 an hour for a recent film school graduate, or you can pay $250 an hour for a top flight video veteran. And on average, most production companies will charge between $75 an hour and $150 for the people involved in key activities like shooting, editing, directing. You're above the line folks, Second, which it was kind of a hard choice to kind of prioritize things. And honestly, I sat kind of twiddling my thumbs going, I don't know which is more important. The second ingredient here in this little mixture is the concept script storyboard. There's been so many clients that I've had that have wanted to just kind of gloss over this and be like, oh yeah, we'll decide what we want to shoot when we get on set. And it's a recipe for disaster, because you get on set and even with the best director, unless you're unless you just happen to be at a really good prime location, you're there with no plan. So having a concept, knowing exactly what you're going to shoot, and having a script for it, and having perhaps a storyboard run out. I don't do anything really without a storyboard. As a matter of fact, there's a great app that I just found that I used on this last campaign that I directed called Shot Lister. And I think it's a $12 app on the Apple Store. And what it does is it lists out all your shots. It tells you how long, you schedule how long you're going to make it. And it'll tell you at the end of everything if you're going to make your day or not. But what's great from a storyboard standpoint is you can import all your boards into there. So as you're going through the shot, you can actually look, hey, this is what the frame's supposed to look like. This is what our previs is, and really conceptualize everything out. And it'll tell you what camera you're going to be shooting with, what lens you and the DP have already discussed. So that way, everybody on your crew, your director has it, your producer has it, your AD has it, your gaffer has it, your DP has it, even your camera operators and your ACs have it. So they know, boom, the next shot we're going to switch to this lens, we're going to be framed up this way. It just increases productivity on set. And so having people that know how to think about things like that become useful, it's kind of a no-brainer to a lot of us, but to, unfortunately, a large percentage of people, they just want to gloss over it. And so you have to say, no, hang on a minute. This is valuable, and here's why. And as we kind of go down the list, you've got your editing and your graphics. I mean, these are the people that are going to take all the raw footage together and make it look great. They're going to take it from zero to hero. And a good editor is every bit as important as a good director, as a good DP, as a good script writer, because they're the one that are actually going to be able to execute the vision. As we kind of go down through here, we've got actors and presenters. A lot of people say, oh yeah, I've got my brother, he wants to be on camera, so I'd like to use him in the commercial. And that's great if his brother's an actor or his sister's an actress, but it really holds up production when they want to cut costs and say, oh yeah, I don't want to pay for a real actor on this. I just want to use my neighbor, my friend at church, whatever. it ends up bogging down production because instead of being able to nail it in, 10 to 20 takes, depending on the complexity of the scene, now it's taking, double, triple that. And as we all know, the cliche is true, time is money. Um, camera, this is kind of where things start getting easier to kind of prioritize. To me, a camera is just a computer with a lens to it, it doesn't matter what camera you're shooting on. Granted, if you're trying to output something 4K and you're shooting on a DV tape camera like a GL2 or something, you're probably not going to get the results that you want to get image quality wise. But at the end of the day, if you're shooting talking heads, you also don't need a Red Epic Dragon or a Arri Alexa. It's shooting it's like shooting ants with a bazooka. It just doesn't make sense. It's overkill. And so, but each of those cameras come with different price brackets that affect the total bottom line of the project. One of my go-to cameras that I usually shoot a lot of stuff with is my Sony A7S. It's when I'm shooting behind the scenes, it's quiet. I don't have audio guys pissed off and yelling at me about, I'm stepping audio in their shot with a shutter. I'm able to just kind of creep around on set and be a ninja and just get good shots. But from a video standpoint, its low light capabilities are great, and it's just a good go-to handy camera to have. And it cost me $4,200. I didn't have to spend $60,000 on it, and it can do a lot of work as a camera, but it can also supplement and be a B camera when I'm using some of the heavier guns on set. As you go into equipment, I've had conversations with clients that they just want to get a couple lights and throw it in the back of the car, and I have to tell them it's going to make us more efficient if we have a grip truck. I never do a shoot without a grip truck because it's like a rental house on wheels. You're always going to forget something. You're going to forget something on the rental list if you're doing stuff a la carte. And when you have a grip truck, you're like, oh man, I need a 12 by because it's really bright outside and need to stop down some of this light, or we just want to create shade for our actors because there's no we're shooting in the middle of nowhere. We've got it on the truck, pull it out, that sort of thing. Your crew is massive. I'm really lucky to have a solid little micro crew of some guys and gals that have become really dear friends of mine that, I would be willing to stack my crew of 6 up against most crews of 15 to 20, just because everybody's just that efficient in what they do. We recently had a shoot last year where we had 8 horses, where it was for an equestrian TV channel, and we had 8 horses to film in the course of a day. So we broke it down to 4 and 4, and we got an extra horse added at the end of the second one, so we ended up with 9. And directing horses on set, they're so unpredictable. I had my micro crew, I think there was about 8 or 9 of us, and everybody was doing multiple duties. I told them at the beginning of the day when we had our 4:30 a.m. call, I said, guys, we're going to all be doing at least 4 different jobs. And we just need to be aware of what's going on, kind of get this, the random safety brief spill. And everybody just popped into motion, even though it was dog tired, been up late from the previous day's shoot. Everybody just popped into motion and got it done. And granted, they weren't even getting paid their full rate just because the project budget didn't yield their full asking rate. And that was okay because we really believed in the integrity of the project and really believed in the overall creative. It was going to be something that we're going to be proud of when it was captured. And as I said, the next day, after we wrapped, just kind of evaluating shoots like I always do, I was like, man, a good crew is key to any project. And I just wanted to throw a shout out to my crew and say what awesome guys they are because they just knock it out of the park every time. And so, Alex, Mark, Brandon, Peter, Heather, Vanessa, Sean, like they just killed it every single time. And then as we go down the list in this blog, we talk about, B-roll cutaway shots. If we're doing the talking head and the guy's talking about, he makes grilled cheese sandwiches for a living and, he's been making grilled cheeses, for 5 generations in his family. Well, if he's just talking about it, that's great. But being able to see him and his dad at the grilled cheese shop making grilled cheeses together, that adds an extra layer to the story. And a lot of clients don't think about it. I had one where we were shooting some talking head content for doctors, and we're saying, hey, we're going to go shoot some B-roll. We'd like to get some B-roll of you at your, office practice. And the client was like, wait, what's B-roll? And meanwhile, it was in the project brief. We talked about it, but it was just interesting that a lot of clients aren't educated in the video process, and it's not up to them to be educated in the process. It's up to the filmmakers and to the producers to educate that when they have their first meeting with them, to tell them what everything is in this. So that's another reason why this blog exists. As we go through, there's all kinds of different, stock footage, narration, audio files. Audio is a big key thing too. You always want to make sure that everything that looks a certain way, you want it to sound as good as it looks. Everybody always wants to cut down on audio. And I have a lot of audio sound mixing friends that are just like, oh God, we always get the short end of the stick, and it's true. But audio is such a key component to this that can really benefit the entire project. And so as things kind of go through here, we talked about, we've talked about all the ingredients that go into actually filming the project, but what about where it's going to go? Is it going to live on a website? Cool. What's that website cost? What's the hosting cost? You're going to put a music bed under here. Well, where's the final video going to go? Is it online? Now we're talking about licensing fees for the music. It could be anywhere from $200 to $2,000, and even above that if you're doing a national spot. Language translation. Is it going to air in different country markets? Do we need to localize it? That's a separate charge. Legal fees, hair and makeup, all these different things. They all go into the big pie of this project. And so this blog exists to kind of outline everything and put real dollars and cents. So hopefully when clients ask me next time, so what does a video really cost? I can point them to this, and I've opened it up to, to guys like you, Dave, and to, other people that are, fellow filmmakers, and say, hey, man, copy paste this, use it, post it, share it everywhere, because all it's going to do is help people be able to guide their clueless clients sometimes, and I hate to bash the clients because they're the ones paying for everything, but they need to be educated. Just like conversely, the producers and the directors that are actually writing content need to be educated by the client on what their business is. I know nothing about grilled cheese making, but if I'm shooting a story about a guy that makes grilled cheeses, I need to have him educate me on what it is he does, how he approaches it, what's unique. Just like I need to educate him on my approach to filmmaking, my approach to producing the video, on how everything flows. And I just think those conversations don't have, I don't think those conversations happen nearly enough as they should. And that usually leads to poor video projects and frustrations between both client and producer.
I agree wholeheartedly. When you were, discussing, the article, there was a time I remember where I was actually sort of pushed into helping with this video project for somebody. And I went down to do a location scout, because it was of course a one-man crew type deal. Right away, it was for a I think it was an elementary school. So I had it. They wanted to do a sort of like commercial type deal. So I went down for a location scout and a tech scout. Basically, they were like astonished that, I was telling them all that was going to go into it. I was telling them this and that, and they were asking me to see a reel. And I was like, well, I was told that you just wanted to talk to me. I didn't bring anything. So I was outside filming this, and this guy stops me and he asks me how much it would be, because I was using the HMC 150, the Panasonic HMC 150.
Okay.
And he stops and he says, oh man, that's an awesome looking camera. He's like, how much would it cost for you to make me a rap video? And I said, I have no idea. I mean, I was like, are we, is this something simple, like just you in a room? Or are we doing something like, California Love, where, they're a rebuilt Mad Max bound Thunderdome? So I said, what are we doing exactly? And, I mean, he was holding up traffic, by the way. People are beeping at him, and he's just talking to me like there's no, like there's no big deal. And I'm like, dude, I was like, I think you should get going soon. He goes, nah, it's all right. I was like, okay, all right. Well, welcome to Philly, Chris.
Right.
And since then, I've gotten approached to other projects, and I'm always telling them, there's going to be a bottom line and other things that, you're not prepared to see. And this is going to be them. And usually I end up sort of backing away from a lot of them because once I see that they aren't prepared to go fully in on this, I've always erred on the side of caution, been like, okay, well, just call me when you're ready, which of course they never are. So I always sort of just back off.
Yeah, I've dealt with that too. It's funny. I got a good chuckle when you were talking about the guy that wanted you to shoot the rap video, because I worked with my cinematographer Alex on a project, and he was like, "Hey man, I could really use some help. I'm helping a buddy of mine shoot this rap video," and come to find out, he's like a really intelligent, really good guy, well read, not your typical rap video artist, and so I was like, yeah, cool, I'll come out, and so. We were out in Dallas at midnight at this park, and I swear to God, I thought we were going to get arrested or something. And couldn't find out the park was open, all night. It was cool. But as we were loading in to a different location, this guy comes up and was like, hey man, you guys making a movie? I was like, no, shooting a mayonnaise commercial. My typical go-to.
Mayonnaise commercial. I like that.
Try to make it as boring as possible. Like, so you just, they just say, oh, okay. And typically they walk away, but he was like, oh, cool. What kind of camera are you guys shooting on? It's like, oh, we have our A7S, and I think we had Alex's Blackmagic Pocket camera. Neither of which are very impressive cameras, right? To the general audience, that is. And so he was like, hey man, so what would it cost, to make a music video, make a rap video for me? And it's hilarious because there are guys that are out there that are doing stuff that want to have creative content, and so I had a quick conversation with him. I said, so kind of like yours, like what all's going into it? Is it just you in a room? Is it you at a location, a warehouse, something? Like, what are we looking at? And he was like, oh, well, like maybe just me in a room, I like to keep it kind of simple. I was like, okay, cool. We'd be looking at, probably, my personal floor for projects that I take on, is, 10 grand. And so I was like, around $10,000, which I know is a lot for a music video, but I was kind of trying to see what kind of his expectations were, just to see, I knew he wasn't, I kind of maybe rightfully or wrongfully prejudged him, but I was like, man, this guy, he's not serious about this. He's just making conversation. So I dropped 10 grand on him. He's like, dang. He's like, the last guy I paid to make a music video for me, I paid him $500. I was like, awesome, and it just went into it. And I said, how long did it take him to get it to you? He's like, oh, it took him about, 8 months. I was like, man, so you paid, $500 thinking you're going to get a final video in probably maybe a month or so. He's like, yeah, I thought he'd get it to me in like a couple of weeks, but man, he took forever on it. I was like, it's always the triangle of slow, fast, and good, or slow, good, and cheap, rather. Sorry. You can have something slow and cheap, but it ain't good, or you can have something fast and cheap, but it ain't good. But you can't have all three at once. It's one of those things where so many people have misconceptions and misexpectations about pricing. Like, oh yeah, I need a video and it's going to cost $500, and to them that's a lot of money. But when you're looking at, okay, so I'm going to have this amount of crew, we're going to be shooting for these amount of dates. It's going to take about this long in post, this long in pre. You're like, oh yeah, it's going to cost about $20,000, whatever. And they just completely, you watch their brain literally melt inside their skull. And you feel bad for them because they had no idea, but you're shooting real numbers with them. And sometimes there's room to negotiate, and sometimes there's not. It's much like I use the house analogy, yes, here's a house you can buy. Can you afford it? No. Let me show you a house that you can afford, and let's figure out how to get that to the most, how to make that the most livable to meet the expectations and make it much like the house you initially wanted. And sometimes they get that. Sometimes they're just so defeated that they're like, no, forget it. I don't want to do a video now. And that's the up and down of that. So that's really what motivated this blog and the other one, looking at video as a investment rather as a commodity. You know, because the idea behind that one was just to change people's perspective. Because when you have those people that are like, oh yeah, I expected to pay $500 for a video, they're not looking at that to be an investment into their business when it should be. They're looking at that as, oh, I've got to put gas in my car to make the engine run. Where's the cheapest gas? And may not always be the best gas for your car. It may cause your engine to corrode. It's not a good investment into your business. Versus when you look at it as an investment into your business and just saying, okay, I'm going to spend $10,000 on a video, but it's going to represent my brand well. It's going to have a good, compelling, emotional message that's going to make people instantly like my brand and have an affinity for my brand. It has viral capability to where people are going to like it so much that they're going to share it and go on Facebook and social and go, oh man, this is the coolest video ever. Here's why. And all of a sudden now people are looking at their brand, and what they spent 10 grand on, they may get back in, upwards of, $500,000 to, I mean, if it's a good video and it goes viral, it could be, millions of dollars of ad revenue off of a $10,000 investment. I would say from an investment standpoint, that's a pretty dadgum good return, you know?
One of the things I did, Chris, was I got approached by a hardware store to come in and do some, like, they were having like demos of stuff. Like, here's a new power saw from whatever. And I told them, I said, if you got a website up, I said, you can put this on here. And I said, this is like a free commercial because it's actually an action. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's sawing through stuff. It's like, all this other stuff. And the guy looked at me and he's like, nah. I was like, okay. I was like, I mean, like, seriously, Chris, I had a hell of a pitch. I mean, and like, I actually was right. I went over social media. I went over how you could put it into the site. I went over everything. I said, I even went through the hashtags, what he could use. And keep in mind, he approached me. Well, he was like, when he passed on the idea, he still wanted me to come up to do one of those. And I mean, my God, this guy, we could have had like 3 other cameramen and they never would have been, sitting down. It was constantly like, hey, can you go do this? Oh, and there's going to be, I mean, like, this hardware store was enormous. So it was like a lot of things going on at one time.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I got all this footage for him and I was like, well, where do you want me to put it? He asked for a DVD and he's like, I got a bunch of other things that you could do. And I said, well, this one, I said, I didn't know what at first what we were doing, but I said in the upcoming, I got to charge him more. And he was like, oh, well, I can't pay any more than this. But he kept asking me like repeatedly. And in the months after, he would send me an email, maybe like once a month, being like, hey, that was a good video. How could we do this? Blah, blah, blah. Basically, he was trying to get his son to do all the recording. And then he was going to have his daughter do all the social media stuff. And I was like, that is never going to work in a million years, but whatever.
Right. It's much like conversations I've had with clients that are like, oh yeah, can you come and teach my son how to shoot video with his, T3i or something? Yes, I can. Or you could just hire me to produce your video content for you. Oh no, I just really want to get my son really wants to get into this. And I talked to the son. He's like, yeah, my dad's just making me do this. Like, I have no interest in this whatsoever. That's not a prime student to teach anything to, much less to say, hey, have him make you videos, because they're all going to look like garbage, And that's why, consumers online especially have to sift through so much crap just to find anything good, from a marketing standpoint, to really say, oh man, these guys are thinking outside the box. It's like they're having to dig through, these big garbage bins on YouTube and ill-placed websites that are just completely poorly designed. And they're big brands out there that just have god-awful design and websites. And I'm going, I get that. They're successful. They're too successful for social is the kind of the running joke. But so many brands just they don't care. And to me, looking at it from a consumer consulting standpoint, is if you don't care about your brand, and if you don't care about your presence online, what do you care about? Do you care about your customers? there's a good percentage of that data that suggests that they don't. They're just there to make money. They're the Walmart of whatever their particular niche industry is. They really just are there to collect money and output products, and they don't care about quality, and that's great. But there are fledgling startups that do care about quality, that do want something good, but they don't have the budget there. So anything that they do fund, and I'll work with those guys all the time and figure out, okay, so you guys can't have the midgets juggling plates, but here's what you can have. You can have something that's quality, that we just kind of rein the scope back a little bit. And there's all kinds of different ways that we can make a budget work. But I love seeing startups that are like, man, okay, I'm going to plug, we're going to make a valid decision that we're going to plug $5,000 into making this video. And you know what? I steward that money like gold. That $5,000 to me is just as valuable as when a client gives me, $50,000 for a project, because that's the equivalent of it to them sometimes, because they haven't even reached their first round of funding. And so brands that care about their social media presence, that care about their websites, that care about connecting with their clients, I will go to bat for and fight for and support all day long. But it's those guys like the furniture store where it's like, nope, I just care about people coming in the store, and maybe my daughter will post on Facebook for me, and my son will shoot some video with his T3i.
Right. And I see those all the time on like Craigslist and stuff like that. And at the point now, Chris, I can just sense not only commercial, videography, but I'm talking about films too, where it's like, this is a passion project. Oh, that's code word for free. This is, there's always those code buzzwords that you're always on the lookout for.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite memes on the Facebook group Movie Set Memes, which is hilarious. I spend way too much time looking at that. It's somebody had taken all those buzzwords from Craigslist and condensed them into a single meme. And it was just hilarious because it was every single thing that we've ever heard on any crew list, on any, filmmaking listservs, on any, hey, we need crew, it's a passion project, we're going to have really good crafty, which is never true. It's always.
Yeah, exactly. Never true.
It's like, oh yeah, we're going to take care of you guys. I've done low budget projects before. I did one 2 years ago that we completely sourced everything for this film off of social media because it came down the pipeline right before the end of the year. This book author had written this great book about her personal loss of her son to a drug overdose years ago and how she processed through that. It was a kind of a self-help grief book. And she's like, I really want to, make a short film out of this. And I was like, well, great. I've always, I've wanted to make a short film for this past 3 months. I've been itching to do one. Let's do it. And she funded it, but we had to really pull some strings to get some stuff together. It was one of those deals where we got the phone call from her that she had the funds together and she wanted to go into production a week later, And so I did 100% of my casting on Facebook, and sourced some really great talent that I should have never been able to afford, but they were just like, man, that's a cool story. I want to do it. And then we sourced locations and props, and we had a crash scene where we had to tear up a car. All of this got sourced within a week just by leveraging social media, Facebook, Twitter, saying, hey, here's some things I need. Who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy? You know what I mean? And everything just came together. So when I talk to clients about the power of social media, I reference that story because I said, if I can put together an entire short film, now that you've read my blog and you know everything that goes into just like a standard video, times that by about 2.5, and you've got a feature or a short, because the crews get exponentially bigger sometimes. I said, if I can utilize social media to source everything that I need for a short film, imagine what you can use social media for to grow your business. And that's oftentimes when I get the light bulb moment of, okay, maybe Facebook isn't just for posting cat videos and recipes. Maybe I can actually leverage this for my business. And that's what I love to see when people understand and say, oh man, this is an underlying tool that I have no idea how to use, but I think this is a fair rate of what you're asking me to pay you to manage this for me. that's a win-win because number one, I'm helping them build their business. And number two, I'm showing them a whole new way of marketing that they've never been able to utilize before. That's so powerful, you know?
And especially now with social media, photos, I understand photos have their place, and then there's GIFs or GIFs, if you will. And then there's video. That's the one thing I keep seeing crop up more and more is like, hey, you want to take this course video for social media? And finally, I think people are starting to catch on that people are watching videos on their smartphones, on their iPads or what have you.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, like if I tweet out some stuff, I understand why photos though were so attractive, Chris, because they're so easily ingestible.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's literally what, 2-3 seconds to see a photo.
Right. Yeah. And you're right because it's, photos are quick and they capture people's attention spans. Even, posting video on Instagram, for example, you've got 15 seconds to tell something compelling. And it's interesting seeing how the creativity that people are using to create stuff specifically for Instagram.
Yeah, I've been seeing, and Instagram now is sort of the gold rush period for Instagram because that is sort of the go-to social media platform because of the ROI. Every time I see a seminar and stuff like that, I subscribe to way too many email lists, so I'm always seeing this stuff. But like I always see like Instagram for business, Instagram for this, and it's always a free webinar. And you know what it is? It's a free webinar, and at the end, it's a course you can sign up for, or it's a DVD whatever training thing. But I see that more often than not, and because people are sort of have a love-hate relationship with Facebook. Twitter is sort of at a crossroads right now, even though I love Twitter. I meet most of my guests through Twitter, but Instagram now and YouTube are sort of pulling up in usage from a lot of different sources that I haven't seen before.
Oh, sure. It's actually funny. One of my biggest clients right now is Patron Tequila, and they have a whole entire social division that is just generating content for social. Yeah, I mean their main ad agency is we're generating stuff for broadcast as well. But they focus so much on social, and they have one of the very, very best social media campaigns out there out of any brand in the U.S. market. And it's interesting, even a couple years, or actually it was last year, we did a campaign with them for the Grammy Awards. And they were the top two contributors on Twitter doing live tweets at the Grammys. It was them and MasterCard, and we were at the headquarters, publishing content on the go, on the fly. As soon as they announced a winner, it was boom, here's a drink recipe. We shot these little 15-second how to make a drink videos where people could follow along and make their own drinks at home that were in the style of Beyonce, Ed Sheeran, all these, Grammy Award winning artists. And it was a madhouse publishing stuff live. I mean, we're tweeting probably every 2 or 3 seconds, and just really dominating the market. It was a Patron Twitter takeover, and it was hilarious because that was my biggest insight into the true power of social media. I'm pretty well read on Facebook, and I know Facebook and Instagram pretty well, but Twitter, I'm just now kind of coming around to Twitter and Snapchat and figuring out how those work to, leverage content quickly to mass consumption. And it was just surreal seeing things go out live and seeing the response immediately and the gratification from your post immediately during a live event like that. I was just blown away.
Yeah. I mean, just being a part of that, something like that sounds awesome because, one, just to have sort of like that, or to trend like that and be a part of like a nationally or internationally known brand like that is awesome, and just to go back to what we were saying before, I think a lot of smaller companies, like, even the mom and pop stores, they all want that, but they don't realize the dollar amount that they've put into this.
That's right.
And the crew you have. Like, I mean, when I was a part of NFL Films, I helped on a few shoots. They ended up, people were like looking at this and being like, oh, Dave, we saw this commercial, how did you guys do that? I'm like, well, I had a huge crew. I had this, I had that. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I didn't direct any of them or anything, but I was like, that's what we had. And they're just asking for me and a camera And some people, Chris, they act like you're a pain in the ass for being there because you're like, we have to have things a certain way. You gotta, do different takes. You got to do this, and some people don't get that, and they also get a little frustrated about that.
Oh, sure. I mean, a prime example. One of the biggest national TV spots, or it was actually international, did a spot last year for Nissan UK that I was part of a drone crew for, and we shot down here in the desert, right on the Mexico border in Texas, South Texas. And that crew had probably it was about 150 person crew. I mean, we had a Russian car on set I'm sorry, a pursuit systems car on set with a Russian arm. We had a full grip and G&E crew. We had, all the bells and whistles of a good sized TV series shoot. But we were making a 30-second car commercial, you know. We had one of the best DPs around, Khalid Mahatsib, at the helm, and Chris Hewitt, who's the awesome director from the UK, directing. And it was just a solid team. But at the end of the day, it was just funny because I could only fathom what the total budget was. I know that was somewhere I heard between the $6 to $7.5 million budget, and they were producing 3 spots out of that. But people look at it on TV and go, oh yeah, it's a 30-second spot. It couldn't have cost that much. But yeah, they do, and there's a lot that goes into it. The most simplistic scenes and stuff that I've seen shot have the most moving parts, you know.
Yeah.
And they can be some of the most simple scenes and simple concepts can also be the most expensive things to shoot. Because what people don't see is what goes on behind it and who's involved. I mean, you bring in A-list talent and you have A-list crew. I mean, you're gonna pay for it because they command certain rates, But it was just a trip because here we were, this drone crew was a couple of guys that are my friends from out in LA, just shooting aerial stuff, and this whole big massive production that was traveling all around Texas, doing stuff.
That's a good point too. Is oftentimes people don't see actually what goes into something like that. Even a 30-second spot. We had Matt Workman on here. For listeners of the show, they know that episode was about 8 or 9 ago, and that's something he talked about as well because he's a working cinematographer and he does all sorts of crazy stuff. And just as a side note, he has a really cool show right now he does on YouTube where he actually deconstructs music videos.
Oh, cool.
He did like Drake's Hotline Bling. He did because he knows a lot of the cinematographers, so he actually asks them how they did this, and they break down what they use and how they actually set this up. And then he did like Ariana Grande's latest video. So it was pretty cool. But again, even with that, he's even saying there's a lot that goes into even those music videos that a lot of people don't really understand. Just about getting shots and seeing who's available for times that I've had friends on film shoots, and they were like, "Hey, we got Kevin Bacon, great, but we only have him for like literally less than half a day. So literally, he has to walk on set, say his lines. We've got like time for 5 takes, and then he's gone."
Right.
It's like stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's funny too because what a lot of people underestimate is the amount of cost for post-production. They think, oh yeah, I'm going to pay an editor, $50 an hour to cut this, and I think I could probably cut this together in 6 hours or something. But to really do it the way you're wanting them to do it, and then they say, oh yeah, can you fix this in post? Can you comp in these flames or these VFX sequences? And all of a sudden, what your $1,500 to $2,000 budget that you had earmarked for post now all of a sudden is skyrocketing up to 25 to 50K just for post. That's not for anything else. That's just for editing. That's just for editing and for audio mastering for whatever you're outputting, whether that's a stereo out or a a Dolby 7.1 mix.
Yeah, very true, very true. Chris, we've been talking for about 50 minutes now. So in closing, is there anything that we didn't talk about or anything you wanted to say to sort of put a period at the end of this conversation?
I guess the main thing I want people to take away from this is that if they can be able to communicate clearly with their clients, to be able to manage expectations. There's a lot of directors out there. They're like, how can I become a good director? And one of the things that got told to me a couple of years ago, when I was still finding my legs in that, was that a good director, all they do is manage expectations all day. And if you can harness that, and if you can manage expectations, be able to clearly eloquate to your crew, hey, this is what my vision is. This is what we've hashed out with the client, and then especially with the client, because there's some clients that you have to handhold a lot, and that's part of the job. It's not ideal. It's sometimes a pain in the butt, but you have to handhold, and you have to manage those expectations and say, hey, here's the boundaries of what I will handhold you on and what I won't. So I think as long as people are able to, number one, say, hey, these are the expectations that we have. If you've got $5,000 to work with, we're not going to be able to get a video that has so much VFX and we're on location in Fiji that it's a project that costs $100,000 for your $5,000 budget. But what we can do is think outside the box and come up with something great that fits your brand on your budget. Because that's the most important thing is we can all dream big. We can all come up with big ideas. But these big ideas don't always make sense for the client. You have to be thinking about what the client needs, not what you want to shoot. Because you can look at it and say, oh, yeah, here's a prime example of where, I've always wanted to shoot a car driving down the road scene. So I've got to make sure that, I can pitch that and get that sold, when that may not be what the client needs. So read your client, find out what they need, shoot what they need you to shoot versus what you're wanting to shoot. And really be open-minded. A lot of people have, a lot of clients walk into a conversation, a creative pitch meeting with an idea or a type of video in mind. They may even have a prepared script. That said, it's still a good idea to say, hey, let's put these on the table, but let's also not marry any of these ideas until we find the right one that we're all in agreement on and say, hey, this is the best way to go. And the other thing that I'd like people to take away that I've listed on the blog itself is share your budget. And this is mainly to the clients out there that may or not be listening to this, but every business has a budget, and yet most businesses are reluctant to share the budget figures, hoping that they'll get an amazing deal if they don't disclose anything. I've been on both sides of that, from the client and agency side. I've always had better results when I said, here's my budget, here are my business objectives. Now, with that said, what can you do for me? Because if you don't declare a budget, then the production company will have to guess. And I've lost jobs where the budget that I guessed at, it was too high. Even though the client really liked the concept that we came up with. It always kind of is one of those open-ended questions of, does the company that guesses you're closest to your undeclared budget, is that the one who wins the bid? Or is it the one who actually is out there to take care of you and give you a good concept and do right by you? So as long as people are out there communicating with the client, communicating from client to producer, just get out there and make stuff happen, make it work, make it look cool, and make brands soar.
Awesome, Chris. Awesome way to sort of put all concise that all together. Chris, where can people find you at online?
My website is Christopher with a PHER, ChristopherHatchett.tv, .television. You can find me online there. You can find me on Twitter at CHatchett with two T's at the end of it, 28. And Dave's reposted my Twitter handle on there. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, I usually post a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. It's just I am Chris Hatchett on Instagram.
Very cool. Everyone, you can find me at davebullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Chris, I want to say thank you very much for coming on.
Dave, thank you so much for having me, man. And I hope we get to collaborate on a project one day if I find my way up to Philly.
Yeah, or I might make my way down to Texas.
Hey, you're always welcome here, man.
I want to actually try a Texas steak. I've never tried one before, so
I know a couple of the best places to bring it to. So you just let me know, man. You just let me know. I will never say no to a good steak and a nice cigar afterwards.
Oh man, I got a box of cigars right next to me too.
Oh, see, now that's just the tease. I'm gonna have to go get one.
The world famous cigar shop. It's actually like probably about 45 minutes to an hour away from me. They have like deals all the time, and one of them was this sampler of 20 cigars for $20. It was like a lightning deal they did. I know usually when you pay that little for cigars, they're terrible. Not this one. They were like, it was like a lightning deal they did. And I've bought cigars from them before, and I'm like a repeat customer. And I'm like every other night or so, I'm actually, I go for a walk and I'm just, lighting up a cigar.
There's a place around the corner of a guy that I know that owns this little cigar shop, and he always has this. He had this guy from Nicaragua that was repping his new cigars, and he was there on site hand rolling them. And I swung in one night, and I was going to go pick up some Olivas, and I saw his little cigars. I thought I'd try them. They're like, I think you're selling them for $5, and man, that was one of the best cigars I've ever smoked. So I'll tell you what, when you come down to Texas, I'll hook you up with a good steak place. You bring some of those good cigars from Philly down, and we'll have ourselves a good old time.
That sounds like a plan, my friend.
All right, Dave. Good talking to you, and we'll chat soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Have a good night.
You too. See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.